When people hear the phrase, "this video should not be available for free," the immediate reaction is often confusion or even irritation, because we live in a culture that has convinced itself that free is always good, that the more we can consume without cost, the richer our lives become. But nothing in life is truly free. Everything you hold in your hands, everything you consume with your mind, has been purchased by someone, whether that someone was you or someone who came before you. Knowledge itself is always the product of sacrifice. It may not come out of your wallet, but it has come out of someone's blood, sweat, and years of life. And if you ignore that cost, if you forget the weight of what it took to produce wisdom, you strip that wisdom of its power to transform you. Think about this. Every great book you've ever read, every powerful lecture you've ever heard, every insight that changed the trajectory of your life, someone paid for that. Maybe they paid with decades of disciplined study. Maybe they paid with humiliation, failure, and endless trial and error. Maybe they paid with their health, their relationships, or their peace of mind, because they carried the weight of truth so that it could be handed to you. When you click on a video, it looks effortless. It looks as though wisdom has just been placed in your lap without cost, but that is a lie. It only appears free because you didn't bleed for it. Someone else did. And that is the danger of free. Free makes us passive. Free lulls us into the illusion that wisdom is entertainment, something to casually consume between scrolling and swiping. But wisdom is not entertainment. It is fire, and if you handle fire casually, it will burn you. That's why so many people binge endless videos, absorb thousands of quotes, repeat all the right phrases, yet their lives remain unchanged. They confuse exposure with transformation. They believe hearing something equals embodying it. But there's a difference between tasting food and being nourished by it. The nourishment only comes when you digest, when you absorb, when you use. The human mind has a strange relationship with value. What we obtain easily, we tend to take lightly. What costs us dearly, we cherish and guard. You know this from your own experience. If you had to work for months to buy something, you treat it differently than if it was handed to you. When you had to sweat for it, when you had to discipline yourself for it, it becomes sacred. But if you simply stumbled upon it, you'll discard it without thought. This is why the very fact that you can access life-changing wisdom on a screen, instantly, without sacrifice, is both a gift and a curse. Because unless you recognize its weight, unless you treat it as though you paid for it with your own blood, you'll scroll past it as if it's just another distraction. There's a reason every great tradition emphasizes sacrifice as the gateway to transformation. The student who trains under a master is often put through years of menial, grueling tasks before receiving a single word of instruction. The point is not cruelty, it's preparation. It's to ensure that by the time the teaching is given, the student has developed the seriousness, the reverence, the focus to actually receive it, because truth, when mishandled, is wasted. And wasted truth is worse than ignorance. It hardens you. It numbs you. It makes you cynical because you start to believe that nothing really works, when in reality, it was you who never paid the price to truly use it. So ask yourself, when you sit here listening, when you take in words that have been distilled through decades of someone else's life, do you approach them as sacred? Do you hear them as though your survival depends on them? Or do you let them wash over you like background noise, something to keep you company for a moment, before you move on to the next free piece of content? That question may determine the entire direction of your life, because transformation requires reverence. It requires the acknowledgement that what you are receiving has been purchased at a great cost, and therefore demands something of you in return. This is why I say this video should not be free. Not because you should pay with money, but because you must pay with something. You must pay with attention, with discipline, with the seriousness of someone who knows that life and death hang in the balance of how they live. If you approach wisdom as though it's casual, it will remain powerless. If you approach it as though it's sacred, it can remake your life entirely. So the question is not whether this content is free. The real question is whether you are willing to pay the true cost of transformation, because make no mistake, you will pay. The only choice you have is whether you pay with distraction and regret, or with discipline and growth. And that choice is yours to make, right now. If the first danger of free is that it blinds us to the true cost of wisdom, then the second danger is even more subtle and perhaps more destructive. It cultivates entitlement. We live in an age where access to knowledge is virtually limitless. With a few clicks, you can summon the greatest philosophers, the sharpest psychologists, the wisest spiritual teachers. Their words pour into your mind like water from a tap, and because it comes so easily, you start to believe that you are owed this, that simply by existing in this time, you deserve wisdom, you deserve transformation, you deserve a better life. But that attitude of entitlement is poison, because it erases the very thing required for change: responsibility. Responsibility is the cost of genuine transformation. You can't simply receive words and assume they will do the work for you. They won't. The hardest truth to accept is that no one can save you from yourself but you. 1,000 books can sit on your shelf, 1,000,000 lectures can play in your earbuds, and you can nod along to all of it. But until you decide to take responsibility for what you know, until you decide to apply it, your life will remain exactly the same. Entitlement whispers, "I've already done enough by listening." Responsibility says, "Listening is only the beginning." Entitlement tricks you into believing that understanding is the same thing as becoming, but they are not the same. Understanding is potential, becoming is reality, and the bridge between them is responsibility, your willingness to act, to shoulder the burden of applying truth to your own chaotic life. Think about how this plays out in everyday life. How many people say they want to be healthy, yet ignore the responsibility of diet and exercise? How many say they want to be wealthy, yet reject the responsibility of discipline, patience, and sacrifice? How many say they want to be wise, but refuse the responsibility of self-reflection and humility? Desire without responsibility is delusion. It keeps you stuck in the fantasy of change without ever paying the cost of it. And here's the brutal reality: the more free wisdom you consume, the easier it becomes to live inside that delusion. Because now you have the illusion of progress. You can tell yourself you're changing because you know more than you did yesterday. But deep down, you know the truth. You haven't changed. You've only accumulated knowledge like stacking books in a library you never open. And that gap between what you know and what you live, it breeds guilt, cynicism, even despair. Because the weight of responsibility never disappears. You can ignore it, but it presses down on you all the same. This is why so many people consume endlessly but remain hollow. They want the benefits of transformation without the responsibility of discipline. They want to escape suffering without shouldering the burden of confronting it. But that's not how life works. Responsibility is not an optional extra. It is the very core of what makes life meaningful. Without it, you are a passive consumer, drifting. With it, you become an active participant, someone who shapes your own destiny. And this isn't just about personal growth, it's about morality. When you refuse responsibility, you leave the weight of your potential uncarried, and that weight doesn't vanish, it decays. Unused potential becomes resentment. It becomes bitterness. It becomes the quiet conviction that life is unfair, that the world owes you something it will never give. But when you accept responsibility, you reverse that decay. You convert potential into reality. You redeem your suffering by shouldering it voluntarily, and in doing so, you become someone capable of carrying not only your own burden, but helping others with theirs. So here's the paradox: free access to wisdom can either enslave you or liberate you. If you approach it with entitlement, it will lull you into passivity, leaving you weaker and more resentful. But if you approach it with responsibility, it becomes a weapon, a tool you wield to carve meaning out of the chaos of your life. The same information that keeps one person stuck can transform another, not because the content is different, but because the posture of responsibility is different. And so the question turns back on you. Do you treat the wisdom you receive as a right or as a responsibility? Do you expect it to change you by osmosis, or do you take it upon yourself to wrestle with it, embody it, live it out? Because the difference between those two choices is the difference between a wasted life and a meaningful one. Responsibility is the dividing line. It is what separates the consumer from the creator, the entitled from the transformed. And until you choose it, fully, consciously, relentlessly, nothing will ever change. We've already seen how the illusion of free dulls our reverence for wisdom and how entitlement blinds us to responsibility. But there's another dimension that's far more insidious, because it hides beneath the very surface of what we think we're receiving. It is the hidden transaction, the truth that nothing is ever simply free. There is always a price, and if you don't pay with money, you will pay with something far more valuable: your time, your attention, and in many cases, your very soul. The modern world has perfected this trade. Entire industries are built not on selling you a product, but on selling you You don't pay to use the platform, but the platform feeds on your focus. You don't spend dollars to watch the video, but you spend the hours of your life you will never recover. And that is not a neutral exchange, because what you give your attention to, you become. Attention is not casual, it is the currency of the self. Whatever you feed your mind will, in time, shape your soul. This is why the idea of free is so deceptive. When you think something is free, you lower your guard. You consume without cost in mind. But meanwhile, the exchange is being made silently. Time is leaving your hands, never to return. Mental energy is being drained, sometimes on things that make you smaller rather than greater. Every moment you give to something unworthy is a moment stolen from the pursuit of your highest potential. That's the real transaction of free. You don't lose dollars, but you risk losing meaning. Now think about what that means when it comes to wisdom. If you approach wisdom as free, you treat it lightly. You tell yourself, I'll watch another video tomorrow. I'll read another book someday. I'll get serious about it later. But later is the most expensive word in the human vocabulary, because every later steals from your only real resource, the present moment. And the tragedy is that while you're waiting for the right time, while you're treating life as though it's an endless stream of free content, you're slowly bleeding out the one thing you cannot replace: your life itself. But it goes deeper still. Because the hidden cost of free is not only what you lose, it's what you fail to gain. When you don't pay with effort, with sweat, with sacrifice, you don't receive the transformation you hoped for. You may collect information, but it doesn't penetrate. You may nod your head, but it doesn't alter your character. Wisdom only becomes yours when you trade something real for it. Otherwise, it remains surface-level entertainment, like noise in the background of your existence. There's a reason ancient traditions always tied wisdom to initiation, to some form of ritual cost. You didn't just stumble into truth by accident. You had to pay for it in blood, in service, in discipline. That was not arbitrary. That was because human beings only value what requires investment. When you've bled for knowledge, you protect it. When you've struggled for truth, you embody it. But when it's simply free, it evaporates like mist. So here's the paradox again. Free wisdom might actually be the most dangerous kind, because it tempts you into believing you've gained something when in fact, you've lost something more precious. Time, attention, seriousness. You've been given fire, but because you didn't pay for it, you held it carelessly and let it burn out before it ever lit your path. You need to ask yourself, what am I trading every time I sit in front of a screen, every time I call something free? Because whether you admit it or not, you are making an exchange. Are you trading hours for wisdom you'll actually embody, or are you trading hours for comfort, distraction, and the illusion of growth? That decision will carve the destiny of your life more than any other. So remember, nothing is free. Everything costs something. And when you accept what appears free, you'd better look closely at what you're truly giving away, because the price is always being paid, whether you recognize it or not. And the harsh reality is this: if you don't choose consciously what you're willing to pay for wisdom, you will unconsciously pay with your life. We've talked about the hidden costs of free, about entitlement and responsibility, and about the silent transaction that takes place every time you consume without awareness. But there's one final truth that ties all of this together. We only value what is scarce, and we only transform when we endure the hard road. Ease does not shape you. Comfort does not forge character. It is scarcity, struggle, and sacrifice that give meaning to what you hold and who you become. Think about your own life. The moments that defined you were not the ones that came easily. They were the times you were pressed to your limits, when you faced loss, failure, uncertainty. Those moments carved something into you that no lecture, no book, no video could ever do on their own. Because transformation is not about information. It is about confrontation. Confrontation with chaos, with difficulty, with the reality that you must grow or be destroyed. That's what burns away weakness and leaves behind strength. This is why wisdom, when treated as free, is so dangerous. Because if it costs you nothing, you will not treat it as scarce. You'll treat it as background noise. You'll nod and move on. But if you had to climb a mountain to hear a single sentence of truth, if you had to endure hunger and exhaustion to gain just one page of insight, you would guard it with your life. You would tattoo it into your soul, and you would live differently because of it. That's the paradox of our age. Never before has so much wisdom been so accessible, and never before has it been so wasted, because the very abundance that makes it available strips it of its perceived value. It's like diamonds scattered on the sidewalk. When everything sparkles, nothing matters. The scarcity is what made the jewel precious, and without it, you lose the reverence that drives real transformation. Let's take this deeper. Scarcity is not just about access, it's about attention. Even now, as you listen, you face a choice. Will you treat these words as disposable, one more piece of free content, or will you treat them as though they are scarce, as though they may be the very words that alter the course of your life? Because that's the truth. You don't need 1,000 insights, you need one if you take it seriously enough to actually embody it. Human beings have an instinct to guard what they sacrifice for. The hard road creates transformation because it forces us to invest ourselves. When you've invested your time, your sweat, your will, you are changed simply by the act of paying that price. That's why the easy path almost always leads to weakness, to emptiness, to regret. The easy path costs nothing, so it gives nothing. But the hard path demands everything, and in return it makes you someone worth becoming. And that's what's at stake here. Not just whether you watch or listen, not just whether you collect another piece of advice. What's at stake is whether you will treat your own life as though it is sacred, as though each decision is carved into eternity, because it is. Every moment you treat lightly, every truth you dismiss casually, is a moment gone forever. You are not infinite. You are painfully, tragically finite, and that is precisely why life has meaning. So when I say this video should not be available for free, I don't mean it should be hidden behind a paywall. I mean you should approach it as though it were scarce, as though it demanded a price from you. Not money, but attention, seriousness, reverence. Because if you do not, it will pass through you like smoke. And the tragedy is not that the words are wasted, it's that you are wasted, that the potential for your transformation evaporates, because you did not treat it as sacred. Scarcity forces us to choose. It demands that we say no to the trivial so we can say yes to what matters. It cuts away distraction and leaves behind only what is essential. And if you want your life to mean something, if you want to carry yourself with strength, then you must learn to impose scarcity on yourself, to choose discipline when comfort is free, to choose sacrifice when distraction is easy, to choose the hard road, not because it's pleasant, but because it is the only road that will ever make you whole. So here's the truth. You cannot wait for wisdom to become scarce before you treat it as precious. You must choose to treat it that way now, because the fire is already in your hands. The only question is whether you will hold it with reverence or let it slip through your fingers like it was nothing. And if you take nothing else from this, let it be this: the hard road is the only road that leads to life.